Hello and welcome to another How to Succeed podcast, the show that helps you get to the top and stay there. I'm your host, Mike Montague, Director of Community Engagement at Sandler. And as always, the podcast brought to you by Sandler Systems, LLC, copyrighted by U.S. copyright laws. And you can find more information at Sandler.com. We're the world's largest sales training organization. And we're here to help you figure out how to sell more easily, or manage and grow sales teams. So we got a lot of fun today, and we have a special guest. It's Grant Baldwin. He is the founder of the Speaker Lab. You can find them at thespeakerlab.com. We're going to be talking about how to succeed at speaking. That includes how do you get more speaking gigs, but also how do you succeed when you're speaking in front of other people. Both of those keys to growing your business, so hopefully that helps. Grant, welcome to the show. Tell me a little bit about the Speaker Lab to start, and what are we talking about here today? Why would we want to be speaking and be good at it?
Yeah, thanks for letting me hang out with you, Mike. So the reality is not everybody watching or listening to this wants to be a full-time speaker. That's how I've made my career for a good chunk of it. So going way back in time, I got started actually as a youth pastor, and then got into speaking and got to a point where I was doing about 60, 70 paid gigs a year. Had a lot of people were asking me like, hey, I want to be a speaker. How do I go about doing that? And so I started doing some coaching, teaching, training around that evolved into what we have now, the Speaker Lab, which is a training and coaching program, teaching people ultimately the business of speaking. How do you find and book paid speaking engagements? And so we work with speakers who at all different ages, stages, levels of life in their career. And so some people who may be watching, listening say, hey, I've done some speaking before. I would love to do more of it. In fact, I'd love to maybe eventually go full-time as a speaker, perhaps in, right now or at some point in your career. Some people may say, I'm interested in speaking. Speaking is kind of fun. I enjoy doing it, but I've got a good gig. I like what I'm doing. I don't necessarily want to do it full time, but wouldn't mind doing, 3, 4, 5 gigs a year. And I'm just trying to figure out, again, how do you find those and how much you charge and who hires speakers? What do you speak about? How does this mysterious world work? And so that's the core of what we do over at the Speaker Lab. And so whether you're wanting to use speaking for brand building, for networking, for recognition, for credibility, for sales, there's a lot of different use cases for speaking that I'm sure we're going to get into today.
Yeah, I think sales for us in business development is one of the bigger ones. So paid gigs are great, but sometimes just getting an opportunity to spend 30 minutes, 45, an hour in front of your target audience of people is a great way to grow your business. And obviously I'm biased. I've been a speaker and entertainer for my whole adult life, but it beats cold calling for me. So can we talk about maybe attitude first here? Why would we want to get up in front of audiences, and how can that help us grow our business?
Yeah, that's a great point. We all understand that at the end of the day, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And whenever you are in an audience listening to a presenter, you're going to get a lot of that feel of, do I like this person? Does this person know what they're talking about? Do I trust this person? Do I believe that they know what they're talking about? And so speaking can work really, really well as a business development, as a lead gen, as a sales mechanism. And so it could look a lot of different ways. There's a lot of speakers who actually have this model where they may go speak, and let's say you go speak for 30, 45, 60 minutes on some type of training, depending on, again, the nature of who you're speaking to, what you're speaking about. There may be people in that audience that are going like, hey, that was really, really good. Can you come teach, implement, apply, consult, coach with my company or with my team or with my department, whatever it may be, with that? Maybe you have some type of agency perhaps, and what you are speaking about, an organization or a group wants to just hire you to come in and apply. So speaking can work really, really well from that standpoint. Speaking is also still one of those things that we, as humans, we tend to hold in high regard. When you are in an audience and you are seeing a speaker on stage, there's a certain amount of cachet that goes along with that. There's a certain amount of credibility that we associate, that we ascribe to that person. And so when you see someone up on stage as a speaker, there's just a level of like, they're the expert. They've been vetted, they've been put up there by this organization, this conference, this group that I've trusted to come attend this event. And therefore I'm going to give some credibility to whoever this speaker may be. So again, speaking can work really, really well from a relationship building, from a lead gen standpoint, from a sales standpoint as well.
I love that. Now I always like in this first part to ask the opposite question. So obviously a lot of people are scared of public speaking, so we can talk about why they wouldn't want to do it that way. But are there any other kind of myths or misconceptions that you see a lot with public speaking that you just like to myth bust for us here
Yeah,
off the top?
I mean, there's certainly people who maybe again watch and listen and who are like, "Hey, you lost me a long time ago. Speaking is not appealing to me
We
whatsoever."
probably should have done that first.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. My wife is that way. She's like, "Hey, you get up, you do your dog and pony show and whatever you do, but don't you dare ever call me up there. I want nothing to do with that." And that's totally fine, right? And there's going to be, everybody in between there as well. And so, I'm not saying you have to be a speaker, that everybody has to be a speaker or anything crazy like that. But definitely, if you are a leader in your organization in some way, speaking, whether you want to do it professionally or not, is definitely one of those skills that I think good leaders have. The ability to communicate, to share ideas, to inspire, to motivate, to encourage an audience, to equip an audience, to teach and train an audience. Like all of those are effective skills of a great leader. So it's definitely something that you may want to consider. So one would be like, not everybody has to be a speaker necessarily, or consider themselves like a professional speaker. I think another thing that is kind of a myth there is that, speaking for free is a bad thing, right? So maybe you've done some speaking before, maybe you haven't been paid. And you're like, hey, I'd love to get paid. How would I go about doing that? And that's certainly something we could touch on, something we teach and work with a lot of our clients on. However, let me give you an example. There's a client that we worked with who they do 30, 40 free speaking engagements a year. And what they do is they actually have a coaching business, and the free speaking business generates all of the leads for the coaching business. So from their coaching business, they're generating several $100,000 a year in revenue, but the whole thing is built upon speaking for free, again, using it as lead generation. So on one hand, you'd be like, well, why would you speak for free? That doesn't make any sense. But again, speaking for free at the right type of events for the right type of reason may make a ton of sense, again, depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish in your business or in your career. So not everybody has to be a speaker necessarily, but there again, there are certainly, you and I have both experienced this. There's a lot of great benefits in being a speaker.
I love that. I like the business development philosophy out of it as a reason why you might want to get going. But also, you mentioned, I think one of the big points is that speaking doesn't have to be on stage in front of bright lights with a microphone. This could be 10 people in your office. You're a leader. You need to give a presentation. You could be delivering a sales pitch, and you need to be a better speaker, and you want to develop your skills in that. I think there are a lot of reasons to become a better communicator, even if it's not getting paid to be on stage and with the rock star lights and the music and big PowerPoints and everything. I think being a great, clear communicator and public speaker is great for just about anybody. So one last question here before we move on about how do we actually do that is, what do you think are some of the common mistakes amateur speakers make that maybe holds them back from being a good, clear communicator?
Well, I think one of the big mistakes a lot of speakers make in terms of like the art and craft of speaking itself is, I think sometimes people assume, well, like, I'm a charismatic person. I could just, hop up on stage and riff for a little bit and, throw out some ideas and it'll all just kind of magically work out. Like, that's just a lazy, sloppy way to do things. So we are very much of the philosophy that the best speakers on the planet really spend a lot of time behind the scenes, practicing, preparing, spending the energy and effort so that by the time they get up on stage, it may look like they're just kind of winging it. They're kind of shooting from their hip or something. But really the truth of the matter is that they spend a ton of time to be a professional and to show up like a professional. And this isn't exclusive to just speakers. This is true with anything. So, if you look at musicians or artists or performers or athletes, you think, well, they're just naturally talented and they just have good dance moves or they're very athletic or whatever it may be. And like, yeah, there's probably a certain element of that, but also they spend an enormous amount of time practicing, rehearsing, and getting better at their craft. And so if you look at another good example is comedians. You think that comedians just get up on stage and they're just funny and stuff just comes to them. And it's like, no, not exactly. Like, again, there's an element of that, but also they've spent a lot of time thinking through every, word and sentence and paragraph and how it's transitioning and what it's leading to. So that by the time you see it on Netflix or wherever you may see it, that's like, wow, that was really, really good and really, really polished and thought through. So I think one of the best things that any speaker can do, regardless of the setting or the presentation, is really to spend some time practicing and preparing behind the scenes. This also helps to increase your level of confidence. A big concern and a big fear that people have is around public speaking. What if I get up there and I don't remember what I'm going to say? What if I lose my place? What if I tell a joke and nobody laughs? All of those things have happened to both you and I. And so What do you do in those type of situations? Well, one of the best things you can do is to really spend, again, the time up front preparing and practicing. So by the time you get up on stage, yeah, you may still have some of those butterflies, you may still have some of those nerves, but there's a new level of confidence because of the preparation that you have put into it. So really, again, I think the important thing that every speaker recognizes, again, at any level, is to really spend the time practicing, preparing. So by the time you come up on stage, you feel a lot more confident and ready.
Yeah, I'll add a few things to that because I think you nailed it. I'm glad you mentioned the confidence levels, because I think people make mistakes when they're overconfident. Like you said, they don't prepare. They think they just know their stuff and they're going to get up there and be funny, and it doesn't work. And people fail, I think, because they're underconfident and they see people like you or I that have been doing it a long time. And the only compliment that I reject in my life, I will take all of them, is the one where people are like, "You're such a natural on stage." And I say, well, you're seeing me after 5,000 performances.
Yeah.
The first time I got up on stage, it was not natural. It was very ugly. And it took a lot of practice to get here. And I always encourage people that it's not fun. You know, the only way to become a good speaker is to be a bad one first. So you're going to have to be bad for a while, and you're going to have to get those practice reps in. But I love the free talks for that reason. You know, people get what they pay for on those. And I love just taking any opportunity for me to get up, practice inside, and rehearse. But the last point I wanted to
piggyback on that real quick. Is, again, I think this is not true with just speaking. This is true with anything. You know, if you want to get better at a sport or playing a musical instrument or a craft or whatever it may be, if you want to get better as a writer, you got to write. You know, if you want to get better playing golf, you got to play golf. You know, there's only like so many YouTube videos that you could watch or books that you could read before you got to I just got to do the thing. And some of it is you start to figure stuff out and start to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And you're exactly right that it's extremely dangerous to get started with some at some type of again, endeavor of some form or hobby or interest, and look at someone who's maybe light years ahead of you and be like, oh, well, they're really good. It's like, yeah, because they've just been doing it for a long time. If you did it that long, if you'd put in as much effort as they had, you'd probably be fairly close to them as well. But you're not. So it's not a fair comparison to look at where they are versus where you are. What would be interesting actually is to look at where they were when they got started, because that's a more accurate representation of where you're at currently. So again, don't fall into that trap of, you know, they're much better at this, or they're way more natural, they're way more comfortable or confident. Yeah, probably because they've just been doing it much longer than you have.
Yeah, it's a skill. We talk about it a lot here with sales, right? People think people are born salespeople or born public speakers, but it's just a skill that's developed. And maybe some people have an affinity, or they have some sort of nurtured desire to be in sales or to be a public speaker that other people don't have. But I don't think the skill, I've seen it too many times. The skill can be developed. You're not born with that. Last thing I was going to add on to the points you made earlier were about the preparation. I think a common mistake people make, and this will take us to our behavior bucket here, is they prepare on the wrong things. They try to write the whole thing and memorize it word for word. And on a long speech, memorizing 10,000 words is impossible. But I want to know personally, I want to know my topic really well. And I want to know what I'm going to say, but not how I'm going to say it. When I'm prepared so that I can walk up there confidently and I know my material, or I could take any question from the audience, then I know that I can relax, be myself up there and talk intelligently and know where I'm going with a nice PowerPoint or an outline of the speech, but I'm not scripting it. Is that fair advice? Or what would you say about when you're doing this prep? How do we do prep to make sure we're doing the right thing at the right time to set us up for a win?
Yeah, so everybody's going to have a kind of a different approach to this. I actually would lean a little bit more towards scripting, but let me give some caveats to that. So if I was working on a brand new presentation, a brand new talk, I would actually kind of manuscript it out. And once I manuscript it out there, part of it is just kind of like to think through exactly what I want to be communicating and how I want to best communicate that. So for example, if you were to ask me, Grant, tell me about whenever you proposed to your wife, you know, like, what was that like? Like I was there, I could tell you that story. It's been a minute, but I could tell you that story. Mm-hmm. Or if you say, Grant, take 30 minutes, go sit down and write out whenever you proposed to your wife. And I just took some time to really think about it. What was that day like? What were we wearing? What did I say to her? You know, what led up to it? Who did we call afterwards? Who did we go see? What was her reaction? did we cry? Like what, just trying to like think it through. And then I came back, I could probably just tell you a better story. And so that's part of the thought process. Now, whenever you are actually manuscripting it out, you're getting all the thoughts out on paper and kind of how you want to communicate things. Because there's going to be some things that like, you can kind of say a variety of different ways and it work. And there's other things you're like, ooh, I want to say it that way. Like that is a really good, crisp way of saying it, or some type of alliteration or whatever it may be, or play on words. And so there's a certain phrasing that you want to use there. And so whenever I am manuscripting it out and then I start to practice and go over it, it's less about needing to know it verbatim. So a mistake that some speakers make is like, I gotta know every word and it's got to be perfectly in order, So an example I like to give is if you were at a sporting event and someone is singing the national anthem and they mess up the lyrics, everybody knows it because they know what the lyrics are supposed to be. So whenever you're giving a speech, if you're like, I don't remember, what I'm supposed to say next, or I told these things out of order, or I forgot a point, or I missed a story, like, nobody knows. Nobody has any idea there, right? And so whenever you are manuscripting it out, again, it's not for the point of, you got to know every single word like it's a movie script or something, but more like you just kind of know the essence of, where it's going. And I'm going to tell this story. And then it's going to, here's kind of what my transition is into this next thought, or how to make this point, or whatever it may be. And so there's just thought and intentionality that goes into it. So the other thing I would say is whenever you're working on a talk, you're giving some type of presentation, you are making an educated guess. I think this is funny. I think this will make sense. I think this will resonate. But you don't really know until you get up in front of an audience. And when you get up in front of that audience, you get that real-time feedback. Are people engaged? Are they paying attention? Are they laughing? Are they smiling? Are they taking notes? Are they looking at their phone? Are they, talking to their neighbor? Are they sleeping? Like, are they with you at all? Or are you getting the kind of response that you expected from that? And it's kind of like whenever I'm not a cook or a chef whatsoever. I don't know any of that stuff. But if you are making a dish, when you're making a dish, you're kind of making an educated guess. And then what a chef does is they're gonna try it and like, okay, I need to cook this a little bit longer, or maybe we overcooked it, or maybe we need to add a little bit of sugar, maybe we had too much salt there, and you're just kind of sampling it and tasting it. And okay, now let's iterate, let's pivot off of that. And that's the same idea with a talk. For the most part, you are typically not giving the same, or not giving just one talk. Or a different talk rather, each time you give a presentation. Assuming you're speaking to maybe different audiences, you're probably going to give the same talk or kind of slight iterations of that talk. So again, each time you speak, you get that feedback. Okay, now I'm going to tweak. Now I'm going to give this similar presentation to a different audience. And again, it kind of depends on the context of who you're speaking to, what you're speaking about. But again, when you're getting that feedback, then it makes the talk better, it refines the presentation over time.
I think that's a really great behavior to get into, is just reading the room in the moment, but also finding out as much about that audience as you can get before you start writing that presentation or before you show up, so you can craft it. I always like to do a little audience calibration test, and I have fun with it and stuff. But I asked a room, we talk about the DISC behavioral profiles.
Yep.
Do you know about that one?
Yep.
I asked a room the other day and I was expecting 90% of the hands to go up. How many people are familiar with this? And only about 10% of the hands went up. And I was like, oh, I need to change the next 5 minutes of my speech.
Yeah.
Because I was assuming everybody would already know. And it's really easy to pivot when you know in there, and you have to do that if you want a great result. And so I think you bring some really great points about reading the room and responding there, but also doing your prep work. I should have known that going in if I was really prepared and doing the right things up front. What about getting the gigs in general? I think that the behavior of finding a speaking gig is always interesting to me, because some gigs book a year out, and some gigs, are usually kind of 2 to 3 months out. And then because I have so much experience, I'm an emergency speaker a lot. So I always tell people like, hey, I'm ready to go. You can just call me up, and if I'm available, I'll do one this afternoon. I don't care.
Yep.
But I don't like to plan on that either. What kind of behavioral plan would you put together if you wanted to speak on a regular basis? What does your outreach need to look like?
Yeah. And so you're exactly right that oftentimes the bigger the event is, the further out they're going to book. Big events can book a ways out, smaller events maybe a couple months out. Oftentimes, actually, we saw kind of through COVID and still a little bit kind of lingering is a lot of events are booking shorter and shorter compressed time periods. So that may be, a month out or a couple weeks out, which again, pre-pandemic was very, very unusual. But sometimes people are, they're kind of waiting to see how budgets play out with the unknowns of the economy, recession talk, that sort of thing. They're like, do we really want to commit to something that is that far out, or do we just kind of want to wait and plan on something that's a few weeks or a couple months out in advance? So one of the things that we do within the Speak Lab is we teach what we call the Speak framework. It's a 5-step process that makes the acronym SPEAK, SPEAK. And so I'll give you kind of a quick high-level overview. But this is what we teach people in terms of like, if you want to find and book paid speaking engagements, if you want to get booked and paid to speak, this is the formula. And so the S is selecting a problem to solve. So the first part is getting really, really clear on number one, who do you speak to and what problem do you solve? And the mistake a lot of speakers make here is we try to go as big, broad, vague as possible. And so who do I speak to? I don't know, man. I speak to humans. I speak to people. My message is for everybody. Yeah. And what do I speak about? I speak about, what do you want me to speak about? I can speak about anything. It's like, that doesn't work. So you need to solve one specific problem for one specific audience. You get that part right, and everything else we're going to talk about becomes so much simpler. So that's the first part. S, selecting a problem to solve. The P is to prepare your talk. Be really, really clear on what is the solution that you are offering and how are you providing that solution. Is it going to be through in person or virtual? Is it going to be keynotes or workshops or breakouts or seminars, whatever? A lot of different pros and cons with all of them, but you got to be clear for you like how you're providing that solution. The E is to establish yourself as the expert. Establish yourself as the expert. So 2 key marketing assets that we teach. Number one is that you need a website. In this day and age, if you don't have a website, you don't exist. It's hard for people to take you seriously. And number 2 would be a demo video. Now, a demo video is, think of it as kind of similar to a movie trailer. So in order to entice you to see a movie, they're going to put out a 2-3 minute trailer. And within that 2 or 3 minute trailer, you have an idea of who's in it, what's the plot, what's the theme, what's the genre. And the goal of the movie trailer and the goal of the demo video is to make you want to see more. So event planners, decision makers, they are in the risk mitigation business. Like, they don't want to hire you, put you up on stage, give you money, give you a microphone, let you talk to their people, unless they're pretty confident you're going to do a great job and not going to say something stupid or embarrass them. So that demo video gives them some level of confidence there. Again, 2-3 minutes or so, some of your best content, some of your best material that gives them a level of confidence. Like, okay, if we hire Mike, if we hire Grant, we put them up on stage, they're probably going to do a good job for us. The A is to acquire paid speaking gigs. Now, this is the part we want to fast forward to, but you got to have these other foundational pieces in place first. And when we talk about acquiring paid speaking gigs, the point here is to be much more proactive rather than reactive. So a mistake speakers will make is saying like, okay, I got my website, I got my demo video, I just sit back and I wait for the phone to ring. And Mike, you and I both know, like, it just doesn't work like that. Like, occasionally you'll have inquiries and requests come in, but better off is to find and identify events that would be a good fit for what you do, the problem that you solve. Again, this is where you're not speaking to anybody and everybody about anything, but you're clear on, I solve this specific problem for this specific audience. Now, where do those people gather? So reaching out to those event planners, decision makers, starting conversations, following up with them is super important. And the last part of the process, K, is know when to scale. Know when to scale, meaning a lot of people who are interested in speaking are also interested in doing a course or coaching or consulting or doing a book or doing a podcast. And you can do all those things, but you can't do all those things at once. Some things are going to come first. Some things are going to come last. You got to be clear about how speaking fits into the mix of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So again, that was a quick overview there, but that's kind of what we teach in terms of like, how do you actually find and book paid speaking engagements?
I love that. Really good stuff there. And I think a lot of things that people miss are the prep work ahead of time, like you said, in sales in general, knowing their audience and the problems that they're experiencing so you can speak to those. And I think the end, people mess up a lot too, is they don't have a clear funnel. They don't have a next step of, once you get on stage, was that the goal, or what's your call to action at the end? Especially if, I think for most people in this audience here for this podcast, is if you're trying to set sales appointments or if you're trying to sell something from this talk, you need to know what that next step is. Are you having them fill in a form? Are they buying something at the back of the room? Are they setting an appointment with you for coaching? What is that next step? And you don't have to have it all scaled, but you should know what you want them to do. Subscribe to your email list, whatever that next thing is, and be really clear about that. I think that helps. Anything else we missed on sort of the goals, plans, and actions of getting gigs?
Yeah, and I think what you touched on there in terms of like the call to action, the CTA at the end there, also really ties into kind of the beginning of like, why do you want to speak in the first place? Like, what is it that you are hoping to accomplish? Because again, this can look very, very different for any number of speakers. There are speakers that do 50, 60, 70 gigs a year or more. All they want to do is book gigs. Everything that they do is all about booking more gigs. And other people that are like, I got a good thing. I'd love to do 5 or 10 gigs. And ultimately what I'm trying to do is to generate clients for, my sales training program or my leadership development program, whatever it may be. And so all I'm trying to do is to start conversations. There's a client that we worked with that she works with like family offices and wealthier individuals about privacy and identity theft protection, basically. And so she goes and speaks, and she her primary goal is to generate clients from that. And so that dictates and determines everything that she does, how she's communicating, what is the call to action, because she's clear on, again, what the goal is that she's trying to accomplish by using speaking. And so for her, a client is worth tens of thousands of dollars in terms of the lifetime value of them. And so it's way more significant than oftentimes what she might get paid as a speaker. So once she understands that, she's clear on that, then it informs everything else in her business. So just be clear on, again, what you are hoping to accomplish by utilizing speaking.
Love that. Now we're over to our technique bucket. And I think there's a ton of advice out there around how to be a good speaker, how to hold your hands, how to position yourself, how to modulate your voice, and all of that kind of stuff. Do you have any favorite tips you like to highlight, or ones that you would like to maybe low light, tell us that we should not follow?
Yeah, I think a big mistake here is it's very easy to try to be over polished or over prepared. And so I think good speaking is a little bit like sheet music and a little bit like jazz. And so sheet music is, here's, again, I'm not a musician, okay, so play along, but here's a piece of music and I need you to play this. It is exactly the way it is written out, right? And so that is sheet music. On the other hand, you have jazz, which is kind of, improvisational, and it's kind of ebbs and flows there, and kind of maybe depending on what other instruments are involved or who else, what the vibe of the room may be. And so good speaking is a little bit of both. I have my sheet music, I know where the presentation is going, but I'm also aware of what's happening. And, maybe there's some curiosity around this particular topic, or this, the group that hired me is struggling here. So we're going to spend a little bit more time kind of digging into that. So I think, having a little bit of both there is valuable. I think also that it's important to remember, like, as a speaker, you are a human talking to a collection of other humans. And so act like a human. I think we've all seen speakers before, and you can tell they're just like so deep in their own head, thinking about, here's what I'm supposed to say next. And I walk 3 steps over here and I do this with my hands. And it feels very formulaic and forced and fake. And it's just like, it's kind of a big turnoff there versus someone that's like, they just seem like a normal human being. Like, that's someone that's a lot more likely to resonate with an audience. And so if you are someone that off the stage is just kind of like a big personality, then it's okay to be a big personality on stage. If that's not you, don't try to be something that you're not. If you watch a TED Talk, or if you watch, some other motivational speaker, and you're like, oh, that's what a speaker is supposed to do. No, not necessarily. That's probably a good representation of who they are. But if you're someone who's more quiet, you're not that funny, and you just have like a very like soft spoken but yet commanding presence, like, be that, lean into that versus trying to be something that you're not.
I think that's probably the best advice. I love the other stuff about not programming it out. I think it's funny especially when you watch TED Talks and stuff.
Yeah.
They're so rehearsed that you can see they move their hands from here to here, and they, like you said, they take 2 steps and they do this. You can always know I haven't played any of those because I never hold up the right numbers. I'll say like 3 things, and I'll put 2 fingers up, and I'll start counting them out on my hand, and I'm never on the right number that I'm counting and stuff. But I think the other one at the end was most powerful for me, is that it's true with salespeople. That, again, people see that stereotypical salesperson as like fast talking, business card slinging, suit wearing salesperson. But some of the best salespeople are quiet. They ask good questions. They're better listeners, and they pull you in with emotion, not with their over the top hype and hyperbole. And I think the great speakers are the same way.
Yep.
We all like a good, funny, Robin Williams or Jim Carrey are going to get your attention. They're going to
Yeah.
be crazy high energy, and they're going to be all over the stage. And there's a time and a place and topics for those and the right audiences. But there's also people that are the poet laureates, the Maya Angelou's, and the people that are really deep, creative thinkers that are great. And I like the people, like you said, that are just normal. You can tell they're themselves, they're approachable, and maybe they're witty or they're very subtly funny, and you don't see them coming. That to me really grabs your attention because you don't know what to expect next. It's not out of control.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like, music or movies. Not everybody's going to agree on something. There may be something that wins, best album or best song or best movie, and you're going to have some people that are like, oh, totally agree, and some people are like, wait, what? How did that win? And the same thing is true with speakers. There's going to be certain speakers that just resonate with some audiences and some individuals more than others. And so don't feel like you have to become the kind of speaker that appeals to everybody and anybody. Like that. That's not the case. The reality is unfortunately not everybody's going to like you as a speaker, which is difficult. Not everybody's going to think you're funny or engaging or entertaining or whatever it may be. But it's important that I think you represent yourself up on stage versus trying to be a version of yourself that you're actually not.
Any specific things on the general structure or delivery or booking gigs that you think makes a difference for people? I know people like hard takeaways on do this, don't do this, or things that are, I kind of like frameworks. When I do a talk, I always know how I'm going to open. I always know what the kind of tent pole moments are in the middle. It also helps me gauge time. If I hit one of those tent poles and I know I'm 5 minutes over or under my time, I can start adjusting the next tent pole. And definitely how you're gonna close. Anything come to mind for you in that bucket?
Yeah, I think one thing that any speaker can do, again, regardless of the content or the presentation, is to tell a lot of stories. I think stories are naturally gravitational for humans. Like as humans, we just love stories. If I said right now, hey, let me tell you a quick story. People oftentimes are going to be like, ooh, a story. Okay, where's this going to go? Is this going to be funny? Is this going to be sad? Is this going to be inspirational? Is this going to be depressing? Is this going to be fascinating? Is this a true story? Is he making this up? Like we have no idea, but it's a story, so we're in. And that's the way, again, as humans, we are wired for, since the beginning of time, we've been wired for story. And so I like to lean toward first person stories and stories that I actually experience and live. Because again, one of the things that you're trying to do as a speaker is you're just trying to connect with that audience. And so I may tell a story about a time I went skydiving. I tell a story about my first car, well, everybody in the audience had a first car. And so when you talk about the highs and lows of that and the experiences and the quote unquote trauma that goes along with that, everybody can relate to that, right? Or it could be, dealing with kids, or dealing with parents, or let me tell you a story about, there's a story I tell about going to Disney World with my daughters, and a lot of people have been to Disney World or they at least have some conception in their mind of what Disney World is like. And so telling stories is just a way to, again, connect with and relate to humans. So tell stories, err on the side of more stories rather than like not telling any stories. So I'm a huge fan of telling stories.
Great thing to end on there. Again, we're talking with Grant Baldwin, founder of the Speaker Lab, and you can find them at thespeakerlab.com. Not very hard. If you want to get paid to do speaking or just get more gigs, go check them out at thespeakerlab.com. Grant, I wanted to get to know you a little bit better. 3 quick questions here as we wrap up. Number 1, how do you define success at this point in your career?
Honestly, I'd say less has to do with quote unquote on the field and more off the field. So I'm married to my high school sweetheart. We got 3 daughters. So it's me and a house full of women. It's the absolute best. My wife and I, we've been together for 26, almost 27 years. And so, if I'm a great speaker, if I'm a great entrepreneur, if I'm a great sales leader or anything like that, but if I drop the ball as a husband, as a dad, like that's not worth it to me at all. And so success to me is less about speaking or anything related to business endeavors, more about who I am to the ladies that matter most to me in my home here.
Love that. And I always like a good war story. Was there a biggest failure you're most proud of, or something you had to get over in your career in order to be successful?
I mean, there's plenty of times where you kind of alluded to this earlier where, you give up, you give a speech, you give a presentation, and it just doesn't work. And like, sometimes it's you, sometimes it's the audience, sometimes it's in the environment. I remember one time giving a speech and a dog comes running into the room and just like zipping around for like several minutes. And you're kind of like, does anybody else, like, everybody sees it, you know, it's like, anybody going to do anything about this dog? Like, do I got to get off the stage and do something about this dog? So like, you know, complete chaos and disruption there. I remember a time I was speaking in New Jersey at a hotel, and they were doing some electrical work outside, or some construction outside, and the electricity for the entire hotel got cut, you know, in the middle of the speech. And it's a kind of an interior room. It goes pitch black in the room, and you're kind of like, well, you know, now what do you do? You know, so some of those moments that, again, aren't like my fault. I didn't do anything wrong or anything, but you're just like, well, you know, this is going to make a good story on a podcast later. And so you just gotta, you know, you kind of figure it out. And times where I'm just like, I'm giving a presentation, the audience isn't engaged, I just feel like I suck, or they suck, or we all suck together, and it's just, you know, discouraging, frustrating. That's all part of the experience, right? You need those moments that just ultimately help you become a better speaker over time.
For me, I always tell people that that's what builds confidence. You think that confidence comes from nailing a talk, but usually that, for me at least, breeds imposter syndrome. I go, ooh, I wasn't that good, or how am I going to top that next time? But when you totally bomb and get through it, or something crazy like that happens, I have a ton of stories that you go, oh, well, I can get past that. And like, it's not going to get worse from here. Then your next gig's easy. Well, at least they're not going to cut the power in the middle of this talk, so I'm going to be fine, and you can move on. Last one. Do you have a favorite quote, motto, or mantra?
Yeah, a big thing I try to live by is that who you are is more important than what you do. Who you are is more important than what you do. And this kind of ties into, again, what I was talking about with my wife, my daughters. You know, who we are as speakers, as entrepreneurs, as a business owner, like, all those things matter. They're important. But who I am as a dad, as a husband, as a son, as a friend, as a human being, like, those things are way more important to me. So I remind our team of that regularly. Who you are is more important than what you do.
Love it. Great message for sure. And I think we got to stop asking kids what they want to be when they grow up, and start asking them who they want to be when they grow up, for sure. Grant, any final thoughts? How can you help us, or how can we help you with the Speaker Lab?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Everything we do is over at thespeakerlab.com. As you mentioned, thespeakerlab.com. If you listen to this show, you probably listen to other shows. So we have a podcast by the same name, the Speaker Lab Podcast. We got 470 some episodes over there right now.
One really good episode.
One really good one. Only one. Mike's. So if you can go find it, let us know. Also, we got a book called The Successful Speaker: 5 Steps for Booking Gigs, Getting Paid, Building Your Platform. Those 5 steps are that Speak framework. And so this covers a little bit more than what we had to, what I gave you in that couple minutes there on that Speak framework. So yeah, definitely check out the Successful Speaker and everything we got going on over at thespeakerlab.com.
Grant Baldwin, I appreciate you being on the podcast here. Learn more about it's on the website. Also, you can reach out to a local training center, not one by you, or if you have more than one location, you can reach out to our enterprise team there on the website too. And if you want to see great speakers, our event is the Sandler Summit. It's coming up March 19th and 20th. You can get your tickets right now, sandler.com/summit. We have some amazing outside speakers. We have some of the best Sandler trainers from around the world doing hot topics for next year. Get you kicked off and ready to rock in 2024. Sandler.com/summit. Until next time, whatever you are, be a good one. We'll see ya.